guys meet very, very early. I'd say the one great thing about this early morning meeting this morning for me is it got me out of my 6:30 meeting that I had. So I had to tell them I had something to do, so I got an extra 30 minutes this morning. Well, I appreciate being invited. I ran into one of your members, and I just can't say no to a speaking engagement, I guess. Celia, my executive assistant, definitely does not appreciate that because she has to move my calendar around quite a bit. But I am glad to be here, and as Stephanie said, I have been here about 15 months, and I tell people I'm going to continue all the way up till 24 months, saying months, so that people don't think that I am still not new here. So it gives me some privileges. But I wanted to briefly this morning go through kind of what I've been doing over the last 15 months and give you some information on some things going on in the city and some things that we've done, things that will impact you and others that you serve and work with in this community. And so Stephanie did such a great job of talking through some of my background. Here is what many of the subjects I'll be talking about, and end on what I think is the most important thing, and that is expectations and going forward, and some challenges that we have, and some challenges that I'd like to make of the community to keep us accountable. So Stephanie did a great job. I feel like I'm going to breeze through this, but I did want to stop and say quite gladly I am blessed to be here in Tacoma. And the process that I went through to get here was a definite community experience, I think, very transparent. I think the City Council did a great job allowing the community to take part in that process. I think there is nothing more important than the selection of a city manager for a city, because that person has the responsibility to make sure that they find a way to reflect and represent the wants not just of the City Council, but demonstrate an understanding and ability to help the City Council recognize things that they may not hear or see from the community and put those things forward for their consideration. And I think this council over the last 15 months has done a great job of allowing me to do that for them, allowing me to lead where I should be leading. And I've been at least astute enough to know when in fact I need to stand back and allow them to lead in the direction that they want to lead. So my career has found my way across the country. I think this is my first time in the Pacific Northwest, obviously. And everyone who knows me questions what on earth I'm doing this far away from South Florida. But I was just sharing with the young lady at the table that I had been complaining for 15 months about the weather. And I just happened to be over in Eastern Washington this past weekend, and it was so hot that I said I will never complain about Tacoma weather again, because I definitely do not miss the heat. There are a lot of things going on in the city, and one of the things that I won't say I'm most proud of, but I've gotten the ability to get used to is change. And so I've talked a lot about change this last 15 months, not just internally, but externally. And so one of the things that forced a lot of that change, and we'll talk about that towards the end of the presentation, has been this most recent budget cycle. And it forced quite a bit of change on our organization. We lost several employees. I think the community got a good understanding of our financial challenges, and services were impacted, and many would scratch their head, obviously, and wonder what was going on in the city during these last 15 months. And I'd say our City Council had a tough job when they brought me on to figure out how to close what at the time was a $30 million budget deficit that was experienced during the biennium, and then looking forward and out to a $60 to $70 million budget deficit. And so it was a tough year and a half, like I've been here that long, 15 months, but I think they got through it, and hopefully we have planted some seeds for some things to be better in the future. With that, council was able to get their balance after the budget period and engaging the community and making some tough decisions to sit down this most recent March and go through a work session where they identified their priorities for the next 2 years. And it was definitely an interesting discussion because we really focused on trying to get them at a higher level in their thinking as it relates to policy development and setting out some broad priorities and allowing staff to work through the issues to help get the community to a better place and to help address many of the concerns. But their top 5 priorities for this current biennium are trying to demonstrate and continue our efforts in our fiscal management areas. I think we have made some strides to reduce our structural deficit. I think that has played out in our sit down with 2 of the rating agencies that have moved us to a different level, not out of the woods yet, but the negative outlook has been changed to stable, and we felt good about that. We most recently went out for a bond refinancing, and that rating boost helped us save dollars in that regard. They also want to focus on human services, public education, and diversifying our higher learning experiences, neighborhood and community and economic development, and vitality and sustainability, and definitely public infrastructure, geared around transportation, and we'll touch a little bit on some of the things they've done recently in that area. And then making sure that we continue our efforts in open and effective, results-oriented organization. And that is where my main focus has been, is really trying to cultivate an environment within City Hall that then when you pour it out into the streets and you talk with business people and community members, getting them to believe that we're doing the right things and we're treating them with respect and compassion in our service delivery. So specific objectives that we hope to get done, these are just a few and were the highest priorities for council to get at some of those previous priorities. But one of the things that came out of this last budget cycle was a big discussion about the city's future sustainability, particularly around our B&O taxes and other revenue sources, and ensuring that those revenue sources, 1, were appropriate, 2, on the expense side, we were using our resources in the most effective way. Council committed to the community. They're in the process, actually, of establishing this task force, or creating a fiscal sustainability task force to take a look at our current budget situation, look at some of our taxing systems, B&O, look at some of our other types of fees for services, and really try to help from a community perspective and business community perspective, kind of point us in directions to go and look to see where we can find some efficiencies and see if we can do some things better to serve the people here. So that process and that committee should get going sometime in mid-June. They wanted to implement an economic development action plan. We had a economic development framework strategic plan presented and adopted by council in the last, I think, 4 to 5 months, which spelled out a 2-year action plan for economic development across 7 broad areas. So our economic development director and his staff will begin to implement that plan to make sure that we can continue to move this city forward. Develop and implement a marketing plan. That plan has not been developed yet. We're in the process of just trying to get our arms around what that means for this city. There are quite a few people who have some concern about going through another branding exercise and just really not spending our money wisely. So we're really still trying to come to terms with what exactly that means to make sure we meet the expectations of the city council as well as the community. Obviously, the council wants to find a way to make the city more physically attractive. And so we are looking at codes and other types of things that cities all across the country may be doing to get at the quality of life and the appearance of their community. and we're trying to figure out what fits and what works here in Tacoma. Obviously, it will be challenging because of the budget constrictions, but we've got to find a way to make people feel good about where they drive in this community and want to get people off of I-5 to come and visit and enjoy the things that we take for granted, but that others just view us in some cases as a passing trip through to some other community. And then develop and implement a comprehensive transportation plan. Council most recently, probably in the last 2 weeks, just approved dollars to support a transportation master plan, something they've been wanting to do for several years. And we finally found a way to get that process kicked off and get that project funded so that we can begin to put the network together as it relates to our transportation systems, both motorized and pedestrian. As it relates to some things that are going on specifically that we're doing, some are internal, some will have impacts outside of our walls at City Hall. But the city's in the process of a website design. I think that got a bunch of attention before I got here. I think primarily driven by one of the clunkiness of our current website, but then our selection of the person to help us. But we are hopeful to launch and kick off our new redesigned website, which will be much more functional and much more pleasing by the end of this month. So we're going through the testing processes now to make sure that we've got all the things worked out, particularly as it relates to ADA compliance and things of that nature, so that people that are visually and hearing impaired can take part in our website activities and access those services that we offer and or information we offer on our website. So that should happen by the end of this month. Our team's been working very hard in that regard. Customer service changes. I am looking to establish, because we talk about it a lot, but you got to do it to make it real, establishing a different model for customer service at the city. We are in the process of trying to bring all of the services that people visit City Hall for down to the bottom 3 levels in the building, so that they do not have to traverse throughout the building to get the services that they need. We want to bring those services down to the first, second, or third floor. In addition, we will be establishing, if council approves, a customer service center located on the 2nd floor that people will be able to come in and truly access probably 80% short of our building department. Anything that they could ever want from this city or information that they need, they can get it in one place from a myriad of individuals who will be in that center. We hope to launch a few months after that a CRM system, a customer relationship management software system that will allow better access for requests and complaints and services on our website. We're looking to stand that up near the same time that we roll out our customer service center in a modified fashion in July, June or July. So I look forward to doing that and taking us to a new level of customer service in this city. Another initiative we have started, which began during the budget process, is a performance management and performance metrics reporting and system to be responsive and clear to the community about what they're getting for the dollars they spend. So Tacoma 24/7 is our performance metrics quarterly reporting system, meaning we're looking at 24 key performance measures across the city. We have many more, but we've selected 24 that we believe are important to the community and important to us to help us drive our services in a much more effective fashion. We've selected 24 key performance measures across 7 different functional areas, from public safety to sustainability to economic development and the like. And we're reporting out on those quarterly to the City Council. We're in the process of developing and enhancing a website associated with all the metrics in the city that will allow for not just static reporting, but searchable type manipulations of our data to get at specifically what the community may want to know, to then generate their own types of reports to get at the things that are important to them. Another initiative is looking at properties that the city owns, some important economic development situated properties that we're going to put out for a request for proposal for development opportunities to our private sector partners to put those properties back on the tax roll and to do things that this community has wanted on those properties for many years, but I think we've been hesitant to find ways to get those properties into private sector hands. So council just reviewed a list of those properties. There's approximately 6 of them. Some in our brewery district, obviously a property adjacent to the University of Tacoma, Washington and Tacoma downtown. So we're looking forward to getting a lot of interest in those properties. I think the meeting was well attended by developers and the like as it relates to their interest in those properties. And then lastly, our economic development strategic framework. We're continuing to look at that and work with external partners to help us figure out how we can help them catalyze many of the projects we've got going on in this community. I've been here, like I said, for 15 months, and people would always ask me why, what has drawn me to Tacoma, and what makes Tacoma special and good. And I call them economic advantages, some of the things that drew me here. And as Stephanie indicated, having come through San Antonio, I always talk about their wonderful marketing job of the Riverwalk and how that's nothing more than a place that just keeps downtown from flooding, and water just passes through that way. But they got this novel idea to put restaurants and other things that you can just sit out and look at water move that's probably about 15 inches high, and it is something special. We've got a wonderful waterfront here, and we've got to take advantage of that. But the port is a key piece of why we are important in many cases. And so I've found a way to work very closely with their executive director to embrace that partnership, to make sure I can do everything I can to help them in their business endeavors. I think another advantage we have, while people may not cling to it or visit it, is Tacoma Mall. It's a very big revenue generator for this city. I know it puts pressure on a lot of our smaller businesses, but it is quite a draw and is a definite economic boost for this city. And then the discussions we have a lot about growing our waterfront and our waterway here. I know it's been a constant battle, I understand, and not a student of history, so I often get in trouble. But staff is good at finding ways to help me stay out of my own way when I want to look at things. But we've got some definite opportunities on our waterfront. It's a beautiful waterfront. I think people, when they come and visit, obviously go, wow, I didn't know this was here. And so I'm excited about the potential there, and I believe that the city is primed for future expansion and development along the waterfront. I think our vibrant neighborhoods, business districts, and our neighborhoods for that matter, help us stand out. We're not a cookie cutter community, we're an old urban community, and we've got some of the best bones, as I call it, as it relates to our neighborhoods and our business districts. And so what we're working hard to do is those business districts that haven't flourished as a part of our economic development strategic planning processes, we're focusing in on how we can enhance and improve those individual districts that just seem to can't get off the ground, and figure out what types of packages and things that we can put together and work with those businesses or potential businesses to get them interested in those corridors that just are not a magnet for the current types of investment that you would see on its own. I think we're working harder to enhance our public and private sector partnerships. I think if there's anything that I've been at least excited about hearing when I talk with people out in the community, is this feeling that they believe our staff and people that work at City Hall have a different attitude when it comes to wanting to engage and reach out and help someone and find a way to say yes to someone and or work to a better situation in anyone's regard. And I think that's made me feel good, because that is the message that I've been sending, is find a way to say yes and help someone instead of the easy way, and that is to go by the book in many cases and say no, that is just way too easy. And then the proximity to Joint Base Lewis McChord. I don't think we take advantage of it enough. I think we realize it, we're proud of it, but we allow Lakewood, who obviously is closer in some respect and more impacted by Joint Base, to spend a lot of their time trying to cultivate relationships. So as a part of our economic development strategic plan, we are trying to forge a better relationship to help meet the needs of many of the civilian personnel on the base and enhance and enrich our community with those fine men and women, and find a way to get them here in Tacoma and provide services for them that they need to have a normal and productive civilian life. We do have some challenges. Obviously, the first day I got here, probably before I got here, we always talk about big bad Seattle, and that's an issue that I've been trying to address. Is we've got a lot of wonderful things here. We need to be proud of them, and let's not talk about what we don't have or how we're not Seattle to the extent that it lessens how important we are. But we've got challenges when it comes to things that are thriving in our northern partners area, and that is just the way our structure here is as it relates to rents for many of our commercial facilities, and or the square footage amounts that developers or whomever can get for the product that they put on the ground. So we've got to find creative ways to do that, but I will always contend that people who want to be in Tacoma come to Tacoma. People who don't want to be here either don't come or they leave, and you cannot control that. I think we need to embrace those people who value what we have and believe is special, and find ways to make sure that we appreciate them when they come, and thank them for leaving when they do leave, and invite others to come and take part in this community. So I don't hang my head or get worried about that, because you can't stop people from doing what they want to do. You can only tout what you have, and we've got to do a better job of doing that. I think we've got some challenges as it relates to our infrastructure, particularly in our downtown area, in our brewery district. I think the power lines there, I think, have caused us to have to work a lot closer with some of our private sector folk and our Tacoma Public Utilities power people to figure out what do we do, what is the solution. I think TPU has been very cooperative. Obviously, they're a part of the city, so we are partners, but we are taking a look now at what we're going to do with some of the infrastructure challenges in downtown that might be inhibiting some of the development in some of our older buildings. And we definitely want to make sure that we can keep those older buildings up and find ways to reinvent them. And then we need to work on our image. And so if you just read about us, if you type in Google Tacoma and or Hilltop or anything related to Tacoma, they always want to take us back 20, 25, 30 years. Those are the top stories that come up. So we've got to get aggressive at our technology game and figure out how we spin and change that. But it doesn't help when, I guess I get mad about it, but when something that happened 30 years ago, they want to bring it back up, and somebody triples in that they finally caught up with. That's some proactive policing work, I guess, in other places. They don't live here anymore, but they're bringing Tacoma back in it. So we've got to find a way to enhance our image, because that supports people wanting to be here. There are so many things that I hadn't known about Tacoma until I got here that would make me scratch my head a little bit. But I think we've got too many positives that outweigh the negatives. And so I'm excited about finding a way to enhance and reframe and reposition Tacoma in the world's eye. We've been trying to work on our tourism angles here. I think we, as the most recent budget that we just approved, we approved an agreement with the Tacoma Convention Visitors Bureau to do our long-term sales as it relates to bringing people here for conferences and to really promote tourism 12 and 16 and 18 months out. And so we're excited about that particular endeavor. But one of the things I noticed when I first got here was when I walked through the airport, there was not a mention of Tacoma anywhere in the airport. There wasn't something you could grab off a shelf that would invite you in and share with you what is available in Tacoma. And I am happy to see that Benish Brown, the executive director of the Convention and Visitors Bureau, they just finished their report or their Travelers magazine for the Tacoma area and Pierce County area, and he has shared with me that it is now in the airport. They've been working very closely with shops and vendors and in the airport to push Tacoma-related products there so people can leave and walk away with things from Tacoma and want to come back and visit and tell that story. So I'm excited about the work that they're doing, but we've got wonderful things on the ground here that people, when they come, they're amazed at what they see, and so we just got to find a way to keep pushing that information to them so they can want to come back here. I think the council also demonstrated in this most recent budget cycle a commitment to what they believe helps make us different and special. We had a lot of conversation in the budget about, you know, what we should fund, what we shouldn't fund, and they made some tough decisions. And I always came back and would remind them, and they recognized that, you know, we can do a lot of things, or we can do some things, but we can't just do one thing. And so a lot of our discussion was about, you know, public safety and what we couldn't do in the budget, and we made some tough choices there. But I would always tell community members, so if I told you, you know, hey, come live in Tacoma, because we've got police and we got firefighters. That's pretty much all we got. You would not sign up to come live here. You want to feel safe. You want to make sure somebody comes when you make a call. But a community is made up of libraries and arts and social service provisions for folk who don't have, and all those things is what makes a community a community. And so we got to find and balance a way to really do all those things, do them well, and meet the needs of the people here. And so that really helped people put into perspective that we just couldn't take what is 60% of our budget and only focus on that, because we do the rest of all the things in this city with only about 30 to 40% of the dollars that we have. And so we've got to find that right balance. But we've got some amazing museums here. We're sitting in one that I think a community would clamor for if they could get one museum. Now, I don't know how we continually support all these museums. I think there are many people with a lot of interest that I think I am glad they are here and walk through these doors. But the city has committed and understands the value of our arts and entertainment and cultural experiences here. And Stephanie mentioned my background with historic preservation. I will tell you, I had to become a believer and be co-opted. So I was not a die-hard preservationist, but I had a wonderful historic preservation team in San Antonio that kept giving me all the Kool-Aid that I needed, and they helped me get there. And so I am glad that we have embraced that in this community. I think we've got a lot more work to do. I think Reuben McKnight, our Historic Preservation Officer, and our Landmarks Commission do a great job, and I tell them all the time that they've got my support. So how do we move the needle and advance the interest and explain to people that historic preservation is sustainability, it is economic development, and we've got to find a way to change the dialogue to embrace it so that people don't run away from it. They run towards it because they see it as an opportunity. And many of the things that we've done in that vein, as you see on the screen, from Union Station and UW Tacoma and Stadium High School, have really been catalysts for economic development around it. And so we've got to continue to push to find ways to save those irreplaceable and unique types of structures, because once they're gone, they're gone. And so, you know, having come from San Antonio and all of their historic structures there, when I heard about a potential opportunity to, I think it was to tear down a church in one of our historic districts here, I was just, in my mind, I'm thinking, I could never even imagine those words coming out of anyone's mouth in San Antonio, to look at a historic church and think about actually knocking it down. So we immediately, well, I got my antennas up, and I immediately wanted to make sure Reuben was engaged. But our city here has a lot of wonderful buildings, and I liken it to, as they described to me, I look at historic structures and preservation and we talked about dentistry a little earlier, as a smile. And, you know, it is just beautiful when someone smiles, and you look at historic structures like a smile in your community. And you take one out or two out, what does that do to a person's smile? And so that's how I look at it. They're irreplaceable, and you can't get them back. And so I just really value what we are trying to do in preservation. And I think that leads me to what we're getting at soon, because I know we've got a history here with at least one structure downtown that was knocked down. I think it was the Luzon building. And so we are working to try to improve that area, because I am getting a little tired of the Jersey barrier thing too. I've only been here a year, so I can only imagine having, you know, gone through that for 2 or 3 years. So we are working on trying to change that gateway kind of look there. But we're looking at streamlining our permitting processes across the city, but finding a way to make sure that historic preservation and the design review process is also streamlined to encourage the historic preservation efforts that we've got going on. I think earlier this year, the council made an action or approved an action to eliminate parking requirements for historic structures to help incentivize also people reusing buildings. But we're looking at developing a code related to the demolition of an historic structure, and looking at the demolition by neglect perspective on it, to make sure that people aren't just mothballing buildings and just waiting for that bad thing to happen. And so we're really trying to put some teeth in our code to encourage developers to move forward. We're also looking at changing a lot of our live-work, work-live spaces to provide for the opportunity for folk to do that. And we're looking at protecting City Hall. And I'm going to move forward a little faster here, because I know you didn't come just to hear me talk about all the things that I love about the city. I am sorry. On economic development front, just an update. Now, there's something on the bottom, so ignore that if you're not a Walmart fan. But you obviously just read that State Farm Insurance decided to put their office spaces downtown and rent out a few buildings that, one, we needed to be rented out. I think it had a drain on this city. So we're excited about that. I think initially we're hoping to have them reach at least 1,000 jobs over the next year or so, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure this environment is conducive for them to do that. They will be filling up parking garages here that I think our parking fund is much needed. And in my mind, the net economic development potential over the 5-year lease that they have is positive to the city, about $6.5 million. So we're excited about that. McClendon's Hardware just finished and opened their first new store in 13 years here in Tacoma. That speaks well for us. And Bass Pro, I'm not a big outdoors person, so people tell me that's a big deal. And so we had some folk in town yesterday that said, yeah, that's a big deal. So I'm excited for this community and the opportunity for people. And Walmart, I think, you know, say what you want to about Walmart. I know it's very contentious here, but I will always say I'd much rather have someone go to a Walmart in Tacoma than drive to the one in Lakewood. So I am hopeful, and that is jobs for people in this community that need jobs. So I'm excited about that. Down on the port, as I said, we've got 2 major expansions going on. Targa South Terminals expansion. They're looking to put $80 to $100 million in the ground there and expand their jobs footprint in this community to add another 50 jobs associated with that. U.S. Oil's expansion, they're planning to invest $100 million in their facilities in the port area. And so they are both in doing our permitting process and excited, and we've been working well with them. So that is another big win for this community. And I don't know if you noticed, we're doing some construction along Pacific Avenue. And so hopefully you hadn't been bothered too much there. But we began that last December. We're hopeful to finish up in November. And along with that comes the wayfinding that I believe many members of this community have been asking for. Council just approved last night an additional 18 signs for our downtown area to move people, vehicle and pedestrian, around the community of our downtown to actually have them know where they're going. This past budget cycle, council approved the transportation benefit districts, and they did improve a $20 vehicle tab, about $2 million a year that's going towards street rehab and other types of things related to our transportation infrastructure. So we are happy for that dedicated resource can be spent on nothing but transportation. So it is a protective layer around those dollars. And I don't know who this gentleman is, but he is looking at a pothole. And we've changed our focus on potholes while we had reductions in public works. We're looking at more long-term fixes. I think we spent probably about $1 million a year just chasing our tail, putting in quick patch potholes that when we say we've got 60,000 potholes, we probably touch one of those potholes 3 or 4 times in that same year. That just multiplied on that. We're looking at more permanent fixes, and through March, we've already done about 3,000 permanent pothole repairs this year. So we're really going to change the way we do that. We are looking at the long-term sustainable funding for our infrastructure here, which I think has been lacking for the many, many years prior to this most recent year. Last night council approved $31 million in grant funding that we'll be receiving over the next 9 months to fund some continuing projects as well as some other projects. And that list of those projects should be available online for you to go and view. Council just asked for us to put them in council district format so people can see in the community where those dollars will be spent in their respective areas. Obviously, April 30th, the City Council adopted a resolution recommending the Tacoma link be expanded in our north downtown central corridor. The Sound Transit Board will be, at the end of this month, or near the end of this month, deciding where they're going to recommend that it go. And so we've got our challenges should they elect to go with the corridor that the City Council has selected to find $50 million on our side of the table. There'll be $50 million that we hope to get in a grant from the federal government, and $50 million from Sound Transit taxes that have already been collected. And then we have to figure out our side of the equation. Every other week, garbage collection. If that makes any of you mad, I'm just going to skip that slide. But we are looking at trying to reduce the amount of landfill space that we have to fill up in time. I think you will get additional cans, so let me dispel that myth if you need them. But we're hopeful that it helps us reduce, obviously, us having to be out in the field. But we think it's a good thing for this community, and hopefully it stabilizes our future solid waste rates. And lastly, 2 things on the budget. Obviously, our total budget is $2.7 billion. It's primarily about $1 billion of that, or close to, is TPU, the power side. But the bottom green box is the general fund, and that's where we spend all of our time this year, because that is where we fund most of the services you're familiar with. And so the next slide is the infamous budget wheel, and it's not animated, but the inside of the pie reflects the expenditures that we have. And as you can see, 59%, close to 60% of our budget in the light blue and in the yellow is related to public safety, with the rest being other services. And we've called out public works, library, and our neighborhood and community services department. But our total budget, again, is close to $400 million. The outer ring are our major revenue sources, from property taxes, sales tax, business tax, as well as utility taxes. And as I always point out to people, when you ask, are we spending our dollars the right way, when you look at public safety on the inner ring, you see that 100% of our property taxes along the outside, 100% of all of our sales tax, and about 85% or 80% of our B&O taxes go to public safety. So they do get the lion's share of all of city resources. And I think this particular graph is a good indication of that. And lastly, as we talk about going forward, The city is not out of the woods yet. We've got projected another $30 to $40 million budget gap structurally in 2015 and 16 that we are challenged to be able to close. And so we'll be working hard over the next year and a half to figure out where we find those efficiencies, to see how we can continue to provide services at an adequate level. So in the theme of Rotary and your code of business, I know we boiled down a lot of our budget processes this year in the 3 areas, and I call them the 3 C's, and that were basically core services. We wanted to focus on what was important to us and providing those services to the community. Continuous improvement, finding a way to get those things done. And lastly, credibility. And that was rebuilding trust in what we do in City Hall through transparency and then how we do it. And so when you look at y'all's code of business and you ask those 4 things that you do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? I look at what we do on a daily basis and finding ways that we can match those same kind of tenets in the spirit at which we do things. Because again, everything we do is for public, and we're only here to serve. And so without that need, we wouldn't exist. So I always tell my staff that we are not here for any other reason. It's a job, but it's to provide service. So with that, I want to thank y'all for listening to me this morning.
Perhaps we could have a couple questions. Any questions? 1 or 2 questions? Yes.
You mentioned a marketing effort or discussions around that. Who would you see as the main audience
that Tacoma wants to market to whom do we want to market?
I didn't ask that very well.
I think that's the conundrum. We're trying to figure out what that means. I think the CBB, in my mind, does a good job and or can do a better job and will do a better job marketing to attract tourism here, bringing people to come visit, talking about all the great things here and getting people off of planes or out of vehicles to get here. I think, in my mind, it's really about image building, and I don't think there's any one audience. I think we'd love to have, it's a very diverse community. Anyone come through here. Now, not stay along and lock and clog up the streets, but to come, check us out. And so I'd say it's really about image building and repositioning what people believe and think of Tacoma, and trying to drown out a lot of the negative things that people connect to Tacoma, and find ways to push out great stories one at a time that really begin to build the interest. Anybody that comes here, they get it. They want to come back. They want to tell the world. It's about getting folk out of this notion that Tacoma is not a good place to be.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, drawings.
Yes, we do. $89 in the pot. And guess what? Says here, 867.
867. Fred.
Over here.
4 off. Hey.
Oh, he has a bucket.
There was a